another one. We'll give it one more minute and then I'll do the introductions. Yeah, Lynn still hasn't got up.
So is everybody from the UK then that's on here? Except me.
Can you hear me okay now?
I'm not.
Oh, there we go. There's a few there that's not.
All right.
Oh, Milwaukee. Okay, all right. Well, we'll kick this off now. So I'd like to say Heather Williams, who's going to be talking about DiSC for better sales performance. So Heather, I'll hand it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm going to try and ask a bunch of questions, and anybody that's on this, if you could make this as conversational, so we're not going to have like a death by PowerPoint is my goal. So any kind of life experience or anything that you're struggling with customers or deals, you can put it in the chat and Scott will, interrupt me and ask away. Okay. Let's see. All right. I'm going to minimize this right here. Okay, so this is some things that we've been hearing in the past year or so, why there's been some deals that have been stalling. Some sales teams are not reaching the final yes to close them. Maybe your sales manager is telling you that you need to ramp it up. You're not closing at a desired pace is what they want. You maybe don't, or your sales team isn't really understanding the decision-making process from their buyer. They want it done a certain way as a sales rep, but they're not really understanding what's in it for the buyer and understanding their process. Also, are you understanding who's involved in that decision-making process? Are you identifying every stakeholder that is involved with closing your deal? And why are deals stalling? Is anybody else hearing anything different in their industry as to why deals have been stalled or not getting through?
Well, I've noticed that people are definitely stalling. People are taking a lot longer to make a decision.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed too is a lot of the sales reps that were outside sales reps, they're now having to become virtual sales reps, inside sales reps, what they're calling it nowadays. And it's, when you're used to that one-on-one, that connection with somebody in person, stopping in someone's office, whatever the case may be, depending on where your call point is, now they're have to smile and dial to get someone on the phone. Yeah, we've got Zoom and things like that, but still people are keeping their cameras off. So you can't really see someone's facial expressions. So it is very important to really understand who you're talking to. And that's kind of where DiSC sales comes into play. It's really understanding your selling style so you can adapt to your customer's buying style.
I was going to add to that, just like, I think that's where you're getting is really just the decision maker. A lot of times deals don't close is because people didn't take the time up front to make sure they were really talking to the right person, the person that not only would have buy-in, but who actually can pull the trigger is how I describe it.
Yeah, I'm sure you've got some stories about that. I definitely have gotten some stories of doing some sales coaching and just about that. It's, you think you've nailed it. You've had the best sales call. They're telling you they're moving forward, just to have the rug swept underneath you, that you're getting an email saying, I'm so sorry that my manager or the CFO decided to go in a different direction. And then you got to go to your manager and explain, how did I lose this deal? You told me it was in the bag. So does anybody have any stories that they can share as to why they've lost some deals this year?
The story doesn't quite end there.
Coronavirus.
If you can hear me correctly.
Been in our family for well over 100 years. And I'm now the sort of custodian of this piano. We also have a lovely photo
Is that
of my
someone's
grandmother actually playing.
Sorry.
There you go.
I was going to say, I couldn't hear it.
So you got a story?
Got cancelled. Yes. Hello. I can't see myself, but
Did you have a story to share?
Yeah, I was supposed to have a show but 2 years ago, the Idle Home Exhibition and Landscape Garden Show, and both of them got cancelled with the coronavirus. So I lost a massive a load of contacts. So
Okay.
it actually disabled the whole business for marketing. Sorry, I wasn't. I didn't know I was on. So yeah.
Anybody else have any reasons or ideas of how their deals have stalled or lost this year? Is it not getting to the right person? Is it because of the pandemic?
So typically, a lot of the team of, but I'm just referring to the deals that failed or have stalled.
Now, if you can hear.
Really been because of social distancing and sickness and health. Things are stalled because the right decision makers aren't there, or some of the people who actually do some of the work are away and just can't get it done. Neither because they're ill, they've had to look after the people, they've been away from the facility. You can't get the design engineering done, testing, validation, field testing, just practical aspects like that.
Okay.
Certainly a lot of uncertainty.
Yes.
Just not willing to commit to anything because I don't know what's happening in the in the near future.
Okay, so this is where understanding your customer is really crucial. So one of the things that I always talk to everybody about when I'm doing some of these programs is, are you developing messages that resonates with the different people that you're talking to? And with that being said is, are you doing, how are you going about doing that? If you've got somebody that you have a new sales call with that you've never spoke to before, how do you know what's important to them as far as purchasing or buying your product or service? Do you know what their sales objections that's going to resonate with them? Have you identified every single person that's important in that buying process? So what are people doing today when we've got a sales call? What are you doing to better understand your customer? Are you going in blind? Are you doing research? Are you getting in the door from somebody else in the company?
I work for a company, we're aligned with LinkedIn, and so I've always been a heavy LinkedIn user anyways. But with that being said, we utilize the platform that we clearly have the case studies and the analytics to support the need to move in that direction, because we got to go where the decision makers are. It's not to knock any other platform out there, it's just pure numbers. It's just about use case and audience, understanding your audience, because I'm sure all of us on here have been in sales. We've been in professionals for years, cumulatively and singly. So it's about really making the best use of our time and utilizing that to really just get in front of our prospects so we can actually move forward.
Yeah, you brought up a good point. I'm a huge advocate for LinkedIn as well. And you can find so much information just by looking somebody up to really understand who they are as a person, especially if they've really filled out the profile. Somebody's trying to get remote control of my screen. Lynn, did you mean to hit that button?
She probably didn't.
Okay, so I'll just decline it. Yeah, I was going back to LinkedIn. So I actually had somebody yesterday reach out to me to want me to use one of their services because they saw that I, work with a lot of companies that call on hospitals and thought it would be very interesting to set up a call with me. But had they looked at my LinkedIn profile, it was all about me working with sales teams and doing training and coaching. I'm not physically going to the hospital and selling a product or a service. So he wasted his time, his boss's time, and my time by setting up this call. So it's one of those things too. Then you're losing credibility because you're not doing your research. Now this person probably won't ever get a call with me again because I don't feel like he, understands who his customer is.
Okay. add a
Go
comment?
ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm a firm believer of checklists.
Yes.
So just like a pilot, before they take off, have the checklist to go through because it's very complicated. Likewise, depend on the if you're just selling a pen versus something more complicated, your checklist is going to reflect what you need to do and check. So again, a generic approach would be the Miller-Hyman approach.
Yes.
But again, adopt as appropriate to your industry, to your objectives, and just go through the list and make sure you've got all those boxes checked off. Have you got the right stakeholders? Do you know what's driving this? Is it productivity? Is it efficiencies? Is it new product to market? Whatever it might be.
It's so funny you bring up Miller-Hyman. This strategic dynamics was my father's company, and he was a Miller-Hyman facilitator and consultant for them for years. So I was trained on that as well. And it's the same thing. You've got your green sheet and your blue sheet, and if you're not prepared for that sales call, you're hurting yourself and you're wasting their time. And this is where we found, going through a lot of those programs and him facilitating, that's where we brought in DiSC to our company, because there was one piece of that puzzle missing. And it was, you could be asking somebody a question in 4 different ways, and you could irritate them, you could annoy them, you could get the answer that you want, or they could just sit there and not talk to you back because they're processing. So it's really understanding them and asking in a certain way and your tone. And we felt like that piece of the puzzle was completely missing with what's call planning. So here, has anybody ever taken one of these assessments? You have, okay. So you understand what D, I, S, and C are. So for those of you that don't, this is the DiSC sales map. So there's different ones depending on the different assessments that they're offering. But D is going to stand for dominant. So you're going to be very fast-paced, you're outspoken, you're going to be a little bit more questioning and skeptical. The I is going to be your person that's really into building relationships. They're really enthusiastic. The S is called steadiness. So you're very cautious, you're more reflective, you got a very warm demeanor. And then the conscientiousness is going to be someone who's really focused on quality. They're very precise. They're going to be a little bit more reserved, but they are still questioning and skeptical as well. So with that being said, we all have our own selling style. You're going to be a blend of all 4 styles, but you're going to be more dominant in 1 or 2 areas. And so most salespeople like to sell to how they want to be sold to. And that's how sometimes there can be a disconnect. Or if you're polar opposites, somebody who's very dominant, if you've got a customer who's more steady and cautious, you might come in like a bulldog. So understanding who your customer is going to help you kind of change your approach and how you ask questions and how you get to the filling out your sales process and things like that. Anybody have any questions? Okay. So how do you sell today? Are you more detail oriented? Do you provide results to your customers? Do you analyze every possible scenario of what your customer is going to say during a sales call? Are you asking very detailed, open-ended questions? Are you providing more of a technical solution to your customers? What is your approach?
You have to really mirror the person you're talking to. If that's what they're putting out there that they need. If they need case studies and analytics, give them case studies and analytics. If they want testimonials, give them testimonials. If they want, if they just want to if they care more about the client success, and how we're going to treat them after, because they are leaving a company, or if they're going away from another source for the same product that you're offering, and because they care about how they're going to be treated, well, then highlight that factor. It's mirroring and just really listening to what they really want, and then give it to them.
Yep, nailed it.
Just as Joanne said, I'd go one step further. In asking the question, Heather, you need to elaborate. Did they call me? Did I reach out to them? What's the driving force here?
Yeah.
Have you ever had anybody, whether your personal life or your professional life, try to sell to you and all they do is talk about themselves?
Yes.
How How irritating is that? So again, it's understanding your customer. I've heard this example, I'm sure you guys have too, is, you know, you're going in to go buy a new car. And let's say you're a man and your wife's pregnant with like 2 kids. You've got 2 kids or maybe 1 on the way, whatever the case may be. And the sales guy wants to go sell him a sports car. Well, that's not what he's in there for. He's not asking questions like, what are you using the car for? You see my wife's pregnant. I got 2 little ones running around. Clearly, I can't get a sports car. So again, it's really understanding and asking the right questions when you're in front of somebody and not just assuming. I got, when was it? LinkedIn always cracks me up because, you know, you get a lot of bots that are reaching out to you, sending you messages. I got one, oh gosh, maybe a year ago. It was a man telling me he used to work for Marriott. He was an executive there for 30 years. He's now decided he wants to go into real estate and wanted to sell me a house. He must have.
Does he know you don't already have one or need one?
Exactly. And it didn't ask me one question. It was all about his whole message was talking about what he did in his career for 30 years or whatever it was, and then what he was doing. And oh, by the way, can I sell you a house?
Sure. You sure he wasn't a part-time prince from Nigeria?
Who knows? You never know, right? It looked like it from the picture, but you never know.
You hit the nail on the head. That's conversation every single day, all day with my clients and our partners. I'm not going to pitch you guys right now. I'm just telling you that huge difference. It's spammy. It puts people off. You hit the nail on the head. It turns people off if they do it. And there's a big difference between using a bot versus actually using, well, you know, like a company like ours, we don't use a bot because it's not personal and it's not, that's just tacky. Great way to not be able to do business with people. If you want to scare them away.
I know it's yeah. So it can work really well. I mean, I had somebody just based off reading my profile could tell what was going to resonate with me. It was like direct to the point and said how he could help me. And guess who got the call immediately? Versus if he would have went the other approach where it was like, I can do X, Y, Z, da, 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 and had nothing to do with what maybe I could use or need. What didn't work well the other way. So, okay. So this is what, you know, I'm showing this map again of what drives your customers. So if you've got somebody who's fast paced and outspoken, energetic, that person, you're probably going to need to build a relationship with them, start asking questions about, you know, they were going to want to talk about themselves a lot. So they might want to know about what game was on last night or their kids or whatever the case may be. And then you had mentioned earlier that, you know, somebody wants testimonials, white papers. Well, if that's important to them, you better make sure you've got that stuff ready and understand it when you're having that call with them. If you know that you've got, you know, there's people that are calling on, you know, CFOs or CEOs, well, you probably have very limited time. You better be direct, straight to the point when you're in front of them. Otherwise, they're going to kick you out. Your time is wasted. Okay, so if anybody wants to chime in here, can you give an example of like your best customer? Who is the most ideal person to work with and why? And which kind of customer have you ever had that was a real pill? Just you couldn't figure them out. They may have ghosted. They're just always a pain to work with.
Are you talking very specific or are you talking very general terms? Because I'm sure all of us represent different verticals and industries.
It doesn't matter, whichever you feel like sharing. You want to get, like, if you want to give a real example of somebody, or you can do general terms.
Okay, so I have more of a manufacturing background.
Okay.
And more often than not, a customer will approach us, or the various companies I've led, and they have a specific need. And they can articulate that need quite clearly. Whether it's a certain product or whatever, or a certain problem, a certain challenge they're trying to overcome. Mm-hmm. So there's different ways of articulating the problem, and then that's quite easy to engage them because you then propose a bit of a solution. But there's a bit more to it than that, obviously, because you ask if they define a problem, you ask, you know, what's the level of urgency, any other mitigating factors, any certifications, any sourcing issues, etc. And that works quite well. Now, quite frequently, it's some kind of engineer is trying, you've got a project, new product development, or issue on production or something, whatever it might be. Then you've got to, so you can obviously provide a solution, but at that point, you've got to expand the forum to include, is there any validation testing? Is there procurement involved? Is there any quality supplier involved? Is there any other contractual issues involved? Who are the decision maker and other stakeholders, etc.? Is it just one center of competence, or are we talking about multiple facilities around the world? So you can bridge that quite easily. Now, a pain in the ass customer is say, hey, you make this widget? Yeah, we do. Okay, I want to buy some, but I want it at this price. Quite frankly, let's go to hell. Because they're just, you might as well go to tongue in cheek, go to Amazon and buy it. Because all your focus is on one aspect alone, as opposed to a bigger reliability, whether it be reliability of the product, customer service, inventory, blah, blah, blah. So, was that it?
Yeah, that's good. Anybody else?
Well, we in our line of work, we're about, you know, connecting businesses, and it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because you can get, you know, like your high D type clients, and the good thing about working with them is that they will make a decision quite quickly and they know what they want. But they're sometimes a bit harder to deal with on the phone and build that relationship with sometimes. But then the other side, you get the ones that are easier to build relationships with, but dither a lot, and to find it a lot harder to, you know, get them to follow through or follow up on, you know, deals.
Or they tell you what you want to hear, but they don't have the decision-making power.
Yeah.
They think the ones that I think that they do, and then they don't.
Yep.
Yeah, it's for me, it's the ones that are indecisive and they're quiet.
Yeah.
They don't want to share with what's going on. So in that case, it's asking the right questions of, you know, help me understand your hesitancy. I can tell that you're in deep thought, you're more quiet, or whatever the case may be. And try to figure out what's going on.
I find them to waste a lot of time. And
again, it's going to be your polar opposite. So if you're, let's say, a high I, typically the C's are going to be the ones that are most challenging for them, because they're bubbly, they want to build relationships. They're probably not into the facts and figures of testimonials and white papers and numbers. That exhausts them. And the same thing, like with a C, somebody who's all bubbly in their face wanting to talk about personal things is going to annoy them. They're going to want, they're perfectionists. They want the numbers and everything right then and there.
Yep.
So, whoops. Okay. Anybody else have an example?
I was just going to piggyback off of what Mr. Clancy had said. Is for me, my ideal client and partner generally is going to fall into the category of someone who also respects the value of a relationship build, of trust, and that's going to lead to trust, which is going to lead to us being able to do more together. I'm not specifically in the world of just a quick sale, and like we're looking for clients that are long-term, that are going to stay on long-term. Even if they go for a certain period of time, they're going to end up coming back to us. That's just how it works with what we do. Appreciating that. And then coming from my background, I do really believe strongly in trying to utilize strategic and direct words that really will foster my desired outcome. So if I tell a person, thank you for sharing that, I'm trying to let them understand that I value the fact that they're sharing, because if it's so hard to help a prospect or a future client if they're not going to open up and tell me what they need, what they want. Like, this is not a conversation. We're not going anywhere. It's a waste of everybody's time. So I really do appreciate that in what I would call a desirable interaction or an engagement is just that. Tell me what you need. What are you looking for? How do you envision utilizing what we have to offer, and go from there. It's got to fit in their plan for their vision for their company. It can't be all about me. It can't be about what we want to do for them and see for them. It's got to be what they want and what they envision, which could be totally different. Don't want to assume.
Well, that's you understanding their process and what's important to them and aligning your sales process with their buying process to make it a win for both parties. And that's, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I want repeat business. I want to keep everybody happy and keep coming back because whatever I delivered, they're satisfied with. And then they go and give you referrals because they're telling everybody else they know that are looking for the same type thing. Okay. Okay, so here's just some questions that can kind of, any of you want to chime in that maybe any of these things have happened to some of you or maybe not. Have you ever had a customer who's gone dark on you? Or have you ever been or ever had a deal that you thought was in the bag, but then they changed their mind? Have you ever been told by a customer they will move forward, but then, you know, the CFO or the decision maker to go with the competition? Have you ever been on a sales call where, you know, they're just very quiet, they don't really chime in, you don't even know if they're listening to you? Have you ever had somebody tell you that they'll just get back to you later? Is there anything else that you guys have been told?
Well, that definitely is good feedback. When you get that we should internalize that as good feedback, saying, well, we obviously didn't do a good job of opening them up and asking questions. I mean, all of us have probably experienced that before, and we have to take it as good feedback to say, okay, I didn't do a good job of finding out, was there a budget concern? Was there a need? Was it just not going to fit their timeline? If we didn't uncover that, then unfortunately, we shouldn't be so shocked when we get to that point, sadly.
Yeah, and it's finding out who else is involved in the decision-making process and making sure that you're on the phone with them and as well. Then you've got your gatekeeper that could be keeping you out on that deal. They want to pretend like they've got, you know, the high degree of influence, but they don't. And I just recently did a coaching call with someone that just happened recently. They were so excited the deal's in the bag and couldn't believe that they went somewhere else. And you know, the first question I asked was, did you talk to the decision maker? They said, I thought I was. Well, I thought and are two different questions or two different answers. So again, asking the right people or asking the right questions to make sure that you're talking to the right people, because anybody can say, yes, we're moving forward, and then you get blindsided. That's not fun. Then your forecasting's off, then your VP of sales is coming down on you, along with your manager, and a lot of unpleasant other conversations, right?
I think one big issue, Heather, is salespeople wanting the deal more than the customer can see the value.
Exactly.
And you've got to make sure that have got a really good, what I call spatial awareness about what's going on in the landscape of your customer's head, so that you can bring them along the pathway with you. And it's not a rush to the close. You'll get to the close when you're ready to get to the close. And it's knowing that.
Yeah, and it's, you know, there's going to be different needs for different people in that decision-making process. The CFO is going to be the money, right? The person using the product or service, you got to, you know, tailor your questions and your sales calls depending on the stakeholder that you're speaking to, because they're all going to have different wants and needs. If you're asking the same question to all four of them or five of them, depending on who's in the room, you know, you got to understand who you're talking to and your customer. And that's where like the DiSC comes in, because you might have someone who's very technical. So you want to make sure that you're answering all his questions. You might have somebody in the room that's using the product who's very bubbly, and that person may want to talk about, you know, their kid's soccer game that past weekend or whatever the case may be. And then you've got the decision maker. He's focused on results, the bottom line, and how much is this going to cost me? So understanding all that is huge. Anybody else? Nope. Okay. Whoops. Okay, so this is kind of piggybacking what we were just talking about, how important it is to identify the stakeholders, because if you don't, then you're kind of wasting your time in a sales call. So what are you all doing to prepare for this next, like your next meeting or whoever is going to be there.
Go through your checklist.
Yeah, we have a checklist. We got 4 key touches that we do to check that we've got everything there. We check the company on Company's House. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, now I can.
You got me yet? So we
Yeah,
can check Company's House. So we check the directors are. We check LinkedIn. We check their website. That'd be the key watching questions.
Recently somebody had told me that they were on a call with a prospect, and when they were on the call with them, he didn't do his research. He didn't look up the person, on LinkedIn. If he Googled the person's name, he had several white papers out. So guess what happened when the person, his prospect, let him know all the different white papers that he had written? He instantly lost credibility because he didn't do his research to prepare for that call. So nowadays we're so lucky because we've got LinkedIn, we've got Google, we've got everything that we can easily go and search whoever we're going to talk to ahead of time to find out, did they go to college? Where did they graduate in? Some people are putting what their favorite hobby is on LinkedIn. There's just so much information that their white papers are publishing if they've done talks or, they're speakers. So we really shouldn't have any excuse nowadays not to research who we're talking to and be prepared for our sales calls. Is anybody else doing anything differently?
I typically add in the mix for my teams, the people who we're meeting with, talking to Zoom, in person, whatever. How can we go that extra step, extra mile, whatever unit of measure you want to use, to make that person look good to the company, to their superior? Because if you do that, and if you run to their fires all the time and help them, whether you can or not, it's irrelevant, then they know you've got their back and they can depend on you. And then they're going to share with you that extra little bit of information what may be key and pivotal in any decision making. And it also increases that bond also. And if there's any other discrepancies and there's other competition in the, in the fight, so to speak, and if there's any discretionary decision making, that any allowance for that, then it'll be biased towards you in your favor. So
yeah, if you've got a coach that's in that organization, asking them, who else is going to be in this meeting? Can you tell me a little bit about them so I can help prepare myself?
Well, I'd actually change that wording and say, if you can identify a champion within the organization who's going to champion you within the organization.
Okay, anybody else? Even just asking, for a list of questions and make sure that we're going to monopolize everybody's time, right? Before the meeting. Oops. Okay, so this is getting into the sales process and the buying process. We kind of touched about this a little bit ago. This is really, we have to align our process with our customers' buying process. And a lot of times, we obviously want the deal to close yesterday. Their timeline might be 30, 60, 90 days down the road, depending on how long it takes for their decision-making process to be. So really understanding that maybe different obstacles, concerns that they might be having and addressing those things. So it's asking the right questions relating to that customer. Okay, so prospecting strategies. What are you all doing today as far as prospecting goes?
Well, like I said before, I work for a marketing consulting firm, and we utilize the LinkedIn network. So what we do is we put together the campaigns and the strategies for reach out to people utilizing the LinkedIn platform, but not doing what irritates people, which is spamming them and dropping notes in their email if they're not even connected, and trying to sell you a car when you don't have any legs, like just basically, or you like to bike, you know what I mean? So that's the strategy. I use the same thing for myself, but we do it for all of our clients, our global clients as well.
Okay. Yeah, and LinkedIn's huge because, like, you know, some of the examples that we said earlier, if you can tell that somebody's written a lot of white papers and they're very technical, that's going to be your approach when you're sending them a message to try and set up a call.
Right, and you said it. That's the end game, or the goal is to have either a higher quality engagement or an actual booked appointment. That's what we're going for. That's what we get for our clients. It's because you hit the nail on the head. You can't try to sell people through the DMs. It's not compliant for most industries. It's tacky. It's going to take conversation for that relationship that we had mentioned earlier to be able to do business and move forward.
I mean, when somebody, like, you know, again, like, we're, you know, not beating a dead horse, but kind of piggybacking what we were saying earlier, if you can actually resonate with something, identifying something that's on my profile, actually took the time to do some research, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to be a lot more willing to have that phone conversation. But if you're going to sit there and do a data dump and talk about yourself, and you don't even understand what's in it for me or what my process is or how it could really help me, it feels like you're getting spammed, and nobody wants that. We're already getting enough junk emails already. We don't need them on LinkedIn either.
Right. We're in such a digitized society. Everybody knows that. But what has not gone away is the normal basic human interaction of actually having a conversation. And appointments look so different these days. It could be a coffee date, Zoom, Google Meets, face-to-face, dinner, together. It doesn't always have to be live and in person. So pandemic or no pandemic, we have to be flexible as salespeople to understand that an appointment's going to look different from one person to the next. And you're aiming for quality, in engagement with your prospect. And if they want to meet over coffee, then that's what you do. If they want to meet over Zoom, or they can just basically do a sale and a transaction all via text message or email, go with it, because that's their style. You have to mirror it and match their style.
So I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, and there's a company that moved from Silicon Valley here to Scottsdale, and their whole company, it's called Sendosa. So what they do is, have you heard of them?
Yeah, you and I are connected because we're alumni, same alumni from Arizona State. Yes. And then I finished high school in Scottsdale. So even though I don't live there, everybody I know is still in Arizona, but I'm also very familiar with Sendosa because of our interactions with our company. So yeah.
Yeah. So if the rest of you aren't familiar, what they do is they're a sending company. So they're all about trying to land a meeting with your prospect in a creative way. So it could be something like sending them a Starbucks e-gift card and meeting on a Zoom call to have a coffee because you're not meeting in person. Or it could be they looked on LinkedIn and they saw this person was really a huge Chicago Bears fan. So they send them a Chicago Bears hat. It's a way of being a little bit picking it outside the box and doing something differently to get somebody's attention to try and get that meeting scheduled. And they're doing it all over Zoom, or if they can do it in person, they can do that as well. But yeah, they have so many different, and they're global. You can use them all over the world. So, but it's just a different technique as far as trying to be a little bit different than sending your occasional email or your smiling, dialing, and leaving voicemails. Okay. Anybody else have any other different prospecting strategies that they're doing besides LinkedIn?
And typically referrals.
Yep. Those are the best.
In the past, I've dealt with rather large companies with multiple divisions across different locations around the world. So once you got, are you familiar with the nose of the camel analogy?
I'm not.
No? Okay, so apparently, I'm not a zoologist, but if the camel gets its nose in the tent, you're not stopping the rest of the camel coming in. It is going in. Doesn't matter what almighty force you believe in, that camel is coming in. So the idea being is, if you've got an in with a company, you can leverage that across its global footprint. Talk about multinationals now, to get into other projects, because that's you. One of the benefits there is you come with immediate credibility, because you're already established, that you're a known entity, contracts existing, etc., etc. So that's one good way, because that's just building on existing business per se. So if you're talking about missionary work, again, that depends on who your demographics are, who your target is, how do they like it. Certain parts of the world, you have to go in person. You've got like Asian companies, for example. They're very, for more fundamental, critical parts, you've got to be in person. You've got to build up that trust. You've got to build up that relationship. They're not just going to click on, I use the Amazon example, and buy it from Amazon. No, you've got to be there and do it. You know, press the flesh, so to speak. So you've got to be where your customer is, so to speak, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, this all goes just like where the understanding your customer is so crucial. Okay, so this is kind of going back to a little bit of your Miller Hyman days as well. So just, you know, developing a standardized plan. You know, what are you doing before the call, during the call, after the call? You know, doing your checklist, making sure that you've got all your stakeholders identified, what's in it for them. You know, even write out your questions that, you know, if they're somebody that's very dominant, you know, you got to ask a question that's straight, direct, to the point. If you got somebody that's the same, you know, decision-making power, but it's a different personality style, just tailor that question so it, you know, mirrors them. And then, you know, if there's questions that you need to uncover, making sure that you write those out so that you know, you get all the information that you're missing to get that shorten that sales process. Okay, so this is just a little bit about us. You know, we are a sales training and development company. We've got a couple of sales books out here. We've got the Seller's Challenge. So that's all geared towards, you know, deal killing obstacles based off the sales side of it. The buyer-centered selling is all about the buying process. So the DiSC sales is actually in buyer-centered selling. We offer, you know, customizable workshops for with all of our IP, so to speak, in both of these books. And then we've got a glossary book that pertains just to calling on hospitals. And then if anybody is interested in taking a DiSC sales assessment and a coaching program, I'm offering everybody, you know, 20% off the coaching package and a DiSC sales assessment. There's a coupon code, so it's on our website. If you click on that, you put this code in, you'll be able to do that. And I'm giving it till the end of July. Does anybody have any questions?
No, but I found this to be very nice to be with everybody and have this kind of dialogue. It's always good. It doesn't matter how long we've been in sales. We can always refine our craft and share ideas. So this was really great. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
I do have a question here.
Yes.
And that is, how can you tell what someone's DiSC style is, you know, by, you know, like email or phone or media, you know, social media such as LinkedIn, etc.?
Very good question. So obviously email and social media is going to be a little bit more tricky versus in person, because you can read someone's body language and kind of tell if they're paying attention or not. But you can still tell pretty quickly in an email. If they're being very short and direct, one-word answers, you'll know they're pretty dominant. If you've got the person that's sending you an email and they're asking hi, how are you? How was your weekend? You can kind of tell who that was. And if you've got somebody who is really focused on numbers, facts, figures, they need proof that your solution is going to work, then you know that you've got to be very detailed in those emails in response to them. A lot of bullet points, a lot of numbers, maybe some spreadsheets, things like that. And social media the same way. If you get on LinkedIn and you can see that somebody's active on there, and just based on how they write it and a lot of times they'll put in there what's important to them. Now, the trickiest customers, obviously, if they don't have an active LinkedIn, and sometimes that happens. They just don't, upload about their summary and do their about section and things like that. So then it's just, smiling and dialing, getting them on the phone and kind of getting a sense if they're being short and to the point, and kind of figure out what their style is. If they want to have a long conversation for a while, they want to, meet up for coffee at some point, they can kind of figure out that they're the I style.
Can a quick question here?
Correct. Yeah.
The higher the dollar value in question in terms of the deal, where it's whether it's I'm selling you a jetliner, an aircraft carrier, satellite, whatever it might be, versus trying to sell you a cell phone. The bigger the value typically reflects the number of people and the longer the process. So once you start getting to the larger scales and you have more of a committee approach, because obviously, whoever's in charge of finance has got to sign off, or engineering, customer service, sales, there's a whole team of people who've got to sign off on it first of all. Can you voice a quick comment about how DiSC is appropriate across a team versus an individual?
Well, it's going to go through the same thing. So if you can really understand what's in it for each one of those individuals that's in that decision-making process, you will start tailoring your questions based off what's important to them. So if you've got somebody that's in the C-suite, their needs are going to be completely different than somebody who's in customer service versus somebody who's using the product, maybe someone who's fixing the product. So it's really doing your research and your homework into finding out where are their challenges or what they're currently using.
So that would, if we're talking about C-suite, wouldn't that normally, playing the numbers here, bias it towards the dominant?
It can be. Sometimes they could be a combo with the C style too. So they could be very dominant and direct, but really detail oriented and perfectionist with numbers as well too. They're going to want the proof as this is going to be a good return on their investment.
Well, I mean, if before they spend X millions dollars, whatever, or hundreds of thousands, whatever it might be, they're going to go through those numbers anyway, or they should do, because you're talking about a big corporation with certain requirements that need to be filled out. So that's a given.
So I used to sell capital equipment into hospitals back in the day. So I sold surgical lights, surgical tables, did operating room design. Our products were not the cheapest. A lot of times we were not on GPO contracts. So we had to make sure that, the surgeons and the nurses and the clinical staff are the ones that were using the product, and they may wanted our solution, but going up to the C-suite, we're going up against people that could sell everything that would fill up the whole hospital. So that's where the value comes in, and, making sure that, when you've got someone's life in your hands, that are being able to articulate a surgical table quickly and not have it break is important. Now, was ours more expensive than the competition? Yeah, but what's the risk of losing somebody's life or the cases being delayed because, the surgery went longer because the table broke? So you have to factor in what's in it for everybody involved. Now, they might have saved a couple $100,000s going with the competition, but in the long run, they're going to be losing money because they could have, somebody's life, they could have a lawsuit, they could have that room might be delayed a couple more surgeries. So factoring in all that kind of money is how you sell to them. So understanding again, who you're selling to and tailoring that way.
Sorry, an example you can use at your free will here. Used to be in charge of a filter company, make industrial filters, dust collection. And we often sold to food processing companies, whether it be rice food processing or sugars or some material. Now, not many people know this, that there's whatever food product you're processing, especially if it's a dry material, there's always dust involved. And some critical, it doesn't matter what it is, rice, barley, grains, sugars especially, at some air density of dust to air, if there's a spark, that thing is very explosive. So don't try this at home, by the way. Throw a bag of sugar up and then light it. It's so there's many a factory that has been flattened and quite a few people killed because their dust collection wasn't up to scratch. Now, what they did was some person decided to go the cheap route and buy the cheap ass filters, pardon my French, instead of the conductive filters. So the conductive filters, whenever you've got two materials going and flowing against each other, i.e. dust, air against a material, you'll have static electricity. Rub your feet on the carpet, you get static, typically. And at some point, you're going to get a spark. If you have a conductive filter, it dissipates the static electricity. You don't get a spark, you don't get an explosion. But many person has died and many factories blown up because someone wanted to save a few bucks on filters because they thought it wasn't important until it blew up.
Yep.
So again, the value proposition is you get what you pay for.
And you got to cover all your bases with who's in the decision-making process and asking those questions and they'll give you a lot of information just by asking, what do you like about what you're currently using today and what do you dislike?
Well, so for that company I was talking about, when I was running that, we would actually refuse to sell to some companies some products because they said they want this filter, and then we ask them about their process, and they would say, well, you need electrostatic dissipating filters. Yes, we can do this, but you need the metal in it as well. And they said, no, that costs too much. I said, well, we're not selling you the cheap ass one because when it blows up, we're not going to be sued for it.
Cheaper is not always better. It ends up costing you in the long run. Quality, not quantity, right? All right.
Unless you're painting your house and you just get a t-shirt from Walmart.
You've got a good point there. Does anybody have any other comments, questions, concerns, feedback, or anything? All right, well, I appreciate all of your time. And if anybody needs anything, my contact information is on this slide here. Feel free to reach out, connect with me on LinkedIn. There's my email. I'm always available by phone. It's on me 24/7 unless I'm sleeping.
Well, thank you very much, Heather. This has been recorded and it will be edited and uploaded onto our Quantum Leap YouTube channel, so anyone can come back and view this again or get the details at a later date, or feel free to contact anyone at the show and we can pass details on too.
Perfect.
And thank you for presenting this workshop, and thank you everyone else for attending this in various parts around the world. There's only one other workshop running this evening before we start again first thing in the morning. So the show will actually be running for 2 weeks thereafter with all the recordings, and you're welcome to go on and look at the stands exhibiting there as well. Cool.
So Scott, exactly where can we look at the recordings?
All right. Okay. So they're not on YouTube yet because they have to be edited first. So we'll get them uploaded. If did you register your details prior to this event?
Yeah.
Then we'll have that, and then we'll be able to communicate with you. And what I'll do as well, if I put my contact details in here, any of you can then get in touch with me if you can't find any of the content that you want, and I can get that to you.
Yeah, I appreciate all your participation and making it conversational. It's always fun doing these and talking and learning more about different industries, and we're all across the world, so it's nice. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
All righty. Have a good rest of your evening and day.